Consumers want to know the facts about the products they buy, but America's agricultural landscape is not easy to navigate. Between different companies, scientific advancement, government regulations, advertisement campaigns, and an unhealthy amount of myth and misconception, anyone would be hard-pressed to make sense of it. That's where Real Ag comes in. From the producers who make your food, to the store where you buy the final product, and everything in between. This is Real Ag. Now, here's your host, Kyle Bauer.
On this season of Real Ag, we've learned about agritourism, honeybees, craft beer, and fish farms. We've visited lavender farms, and we've seen a robotic dairy, just to name a few. So sit back with us as we take a look back at some highlights from Season 6 of Real Ag.
Production of Real Ag is made possible in part by an underwriting grant from
the Kansas Soybean Commission, the Soybean Checkoff, progress powered by farmers.
What is agritourism?
Well, it's brought to me it's brought the city folks to the rural area. Ag, of course, that's the rural area, and the tourism is bringing them city folks and out-of-state folks in here. In fact, I mean, we get a lot of them here. Kansas City is really our number one spot. We get a lot of people. It's a good day trip for them overnight and go back. We had two families from Texas up here, which was really interesting last night. And one family from clear down at Brownsville, Texas, they drove up here. They wanted to do something. They're going to Derby for Thanksgiving, but went from our place down to Branson, Missouri, and back to Derby, Kansas. So I thought that's pretty unique, and they come just to come to the bed and breakfast in the exotic farm.
Agritourism is using entertainment, drawing people to your farm using agricultural related activities, things that are on our farm. It draws people who aren't necessarily informed about agriculture to your location, and it's a great learning tool. We have a lot of schools that come out, will bring their field trips out to either the corn maze or the pumpkin patch or both. And we do a lot of education involved with those.
We can open our doors to more city people with the agritourism. I think we have to have something really to offer. I don't think we can all have the same thing to sell. I think wheat harvest, corn harvest, cattle production, but I think you have to gear it. Fortunately, I was born and raised in the entertainment business, so it's easier for me than it would be for a lot of people to know how to entertain the people when they come to your facilities. And you have to have something, there that will keep them there for a while and keep them interested, enthusiastic, and so you can't just maybe put them on a combine and run around the field just a little bit. I think you have to have a program that really spans across the whole wheat harvest and the wheat planting and the combine and the tractors, and there's people very interested in that type of stuff.
How did your business venture get started?
My dad was a rodeo clown, and so I don't ever remember that. My memory's not that bad, but I was so little when I helped him with his first acts at the rodeos, with a trick horse or a mule or a Brahma bull. And so I grew up through that. So we just kept expanding a little more. And I started getting some off-the-wall animals to train, guanaco, which is a cousin of llama, a buffalo, a chimpanzee, a zebra, and I kept adding to it, and we got quite a few animals, and then churches and schools would say, could you bring some animals here or there? And so we would, take them out, and we kept collecting more animals, not necessarily collecting, but raising more animals and adding to our numbers and varieties, and we've, through the years, we've added and subtracted. Some animals don't fit in our operation here or on the road, So we try to maintain the animals that we are really comfortable with, that we really know, we really understand, that we can present well. And so it's just grown, and the family's helping me. We have a lot of good employees here on the farm. We have 7 people that never leave the farm, just take care of the animals here on the farm. And being licensed, and that's another thing with agritourism, we all have to be licensed properly and insured properly. That's really important, and follow all the rules and regulations we have.
For us personally, it was a way to bring us back to the farm. 20 years ago, when we started this, we all had outside jobs trying to support our families, but we weren't really happy living in the cities or wherever we were at. So we felt this would be a great way that we could come back home, come back to the farm, and make a living doing that. It was just something that was an idea we thought we'd try for 1 year. At that time in 1999 was our first maize, and we didn't have any idea what to expect. We had known of other mazes outside of Kansas, and as far as we know, we were the first ones to start this in Kansas. So we didn't have any idea what to expect, whether we would get even 100 people out there. And it just exceeded our expectations, and just has continued to grow from there.
What government agencies are involved in dairy?
The FDA regulates and keeps tabs on all the dairy producers and the milk that's handled from the farm to the store. The Kansas Department of Agriculture is really tied into that. They're the ones that on the state level keep track of all the dairy farmers, so absolutely lots of regulations.
How many dairy farms are there in Kansas?
We have just under 300 dairy farms here in the state, so lots of farm families. Most of your smaller dairy farms are going to be in the eastern part of the state, where your larger dairies with the most amount of cows are going to be out in the western half. In eastern Kansas, there's some dairies as few as 50 cows, and then as you head more towards the western half of the state, you're talking several thousand cows. So it just varies. There's small dairy farm families, and then there's farms that have started out as a family farm and have developed more into a larger operation. So lots of different sizes and lots of different cows.
What is the economic impact of a local dairy farm?
Kansas has really grown in the last couple years in dairy and has contributed several $1 billion to the industry or to the economy here in Kansas. So very big growing dairy state, have a new milk plant going in the western half of Kansas that's really going to enhance the economy in that area. So lots of jobs, yes.
How is most milking done in Kansas?
Most milking is done by automation, either with milking machines and equipment or robotics. There are 2 dairies that have opened up in the last year that are milking with robots. There's a lot of positives towards the robotics. First off, it's going to make the family life of the dairy farmers a lot better. I don't know if people understand, but dairy farming is a 365-day-a-year job, twice a day at least. Some dairy farms are 3 times a day. And so that takes a lot away from your family time. There's a lot of stress on the family. They can't get away. It's hard to find people to milk for them. So by putting robots in, you're really increasing the quality of your family life. It gives you a little more flexibility.
Are there different types of honey?
There are so many different types of honey. It depends on what the bee, actually the flower that the bee works on. And so we like to say there's about 300 different varietals of honey, just like wines. There's different kind of wines. There's so many different flowers in the springtime. We may have dandelions, and the bees will, you guys that hate dandelions in your yard, beekeepers like them. And we don't harvest any dandelion honey because the bees will work it in the springtime, but they consume it so fast that they consume it from themselves. But you could get dandelion honey. In the central part of the U.S., we have a lot of alfalfa and clover. We can have soybeans, is what our main crops are off. But then we also have a lot of the fall flowers. Even the pink flower you may see growing in the ditches, smartweed or heartsease, that produces a real strong flavored honey. Compared to the clover or the soybean or alfalfa.
At any one time we have in our house probably 12 to 15 and just keep rotating. Go to different stores, find different varietals. Not so much imported honey. You can buy honey in the big box stores that's imported from Argentina and Brazil. I don't really recommend that because all of those honeys have been blended. You don't know what the source is. So buy honey that you can identify the source from a local beekeeper or from a local grocery store that the source is clearly indicated on the jar.
Typically, we're going to have what we call, in our hobby business, we call it wildflower honey. We could say that this honey we're selling today at the farmer's market is clover honey, and it probably has a lot of clover in it. It probably has some alfalfa in it, probably has some dandelion in it. So we just typically call it wildflower and call it good, and that encompasses everything.
What are ales?
Ale is beer. It's just a different type of yeast that's used to ferment the beer. So ale is going to have a little bit more body. The way that it ferments is a little different. The temperature it ferments is a little different. And it does take a shorter period of time to hit full attenuation or full fermentation of the finished beer.
It is a top fermenting yeast where lagers, which is the other type of beer, are made with a bottom fermenting yeast. So those are the two official categories of beer, are ales and lagers.
What are lagers?
Lagers are a different type of yeast strain. I won't get into the too scientific on it, but they're going to ferment for a longer period of time. They're going to ferment a little bit colder at a little lower temperature, and they end up cleaning up the beer quite a bit more during that fermentation process because it is longer. And lager actually means, to store. So after you ferment a lager beer, traditionally it is to be stored in a cold environment so the yeast can really clean up the beer over a longer period of time. So some traditional lagers would even be stored for up to 6 months before they were served.
We produce about 7 different ales and are currently producing 2 different lagers.
I think right now with the American craft beer movement, we're moving more towards ales, even since the late 1980s, early 90s. But prior to that, it was a lot more lagers and pilsners were being drank. And I think in Western Kansas also, we're still educating people to drinking more ales from their traditional lager beers they've been drinking, whether it's Bud Light, Miller Lite, Coors Light, that kind of thing. So I think we're just getting into more ales here in the past 20 years.
The people that like dark beers like dark beers, but as a rule, we're in light beer country, and that's one of the things that we decided early on. If people like, well, the way I told the brewers, if everybody wants vanilla, we don't need to make a lot of chocolate. So that's the way we approached it all. And we are one of the very few microbreweries that actually makes a lager beer. And the lager is known for its a crisp, more refreshing taste, not as heavy. And we make a couple different lagers, and the one that you're going to see really rise to the surface quickly is called Life Coach, and it's in 30 packs. It's very competitively priced.
For those who may not understand all that's involved in agriculture, how is technology used in different aspects of the industry?
And what we deal with here as a John Deere dealership, the 2 main things that we use technology for, the broad categories anyway, are in automation and in record keeping. We have technology on the machines that allow us to automate more and more of the functions, whether that be auto track with steering being taken over and controlled by the machine, or whether that be section control, turning off rows on a planter or sections on a planter or fertilizer applicator. As well as adjusting header height or down pressure or anything like that that is more and more of that is being done by the machine and the computers within it.
There's so many different aspects to technology in agriculture right now. There's things popping up every year. We specifically focus on the drone aspect of everything, and it's not necessarily the drone itself that really makes us do what we're doing. It's the data that the drone produces that allows us to go out and fly these things on a daily basis. Obviously, we're not just flying drones over farms just for the fun of it. We're actually out there producing actionable data, actionable results to where a producer can actually take those results and make an informed decision off of those results. There's other different types of precision technology out there. We're focused mainly on the drone aspect and the sensing aspect of precision agriculture.
What does the KDA Food Safety and Lodging do?
We inspect and regulate restaurants and other food establishments like grocery stores and convenience stores, as well as food processors, lodging establishments, and egg sales in the state of Kansas. We have a risk-based inspection model, and we inspect high risk once every 12 months, medium risk once every 15 months, and low risk once every 18 months.
What is aquaculture?
Aquaculture is basically just like cattle farming, but it's for water, in which we produce numerous things, including fish. We also are able to do things like mussels, salamanders, stream fishes, non-sport fish, things like that. We actually have a native species building going in at our Farlington facility that's in works right now, where we're actually going to do some mussels and some more of our native small stream fishes for restorations. For instance, like when a railroad has an accident and they spill chlorine in the water like they did down here at Harrington, and they need to restore some of those native fish populations, we'll be able to do that. So aquaculture encompasses not only our game fish, but our non-game fish and native species, and also some of those species that you don't think about, such as mussels, salamanders, things like that. So it's really a whole group of aquatic species that we can do in culture. But right here we do mostly sport fish for the fishermen in Kansas.
What is AI, or artificial insemination?
Artificial insemination is the process of collecting a bull, putting it into a semen straw, and going into the uterus of a cow and fertilizing her egg just like a bull would, only we're able to use higher quality genetics and increase genetics faster, and whether it be weaning weight, yearling weights, carcass qualities, calving ease, and you plus with using a bull that gets more widely used, you're able to get more reliability in those genetics.
AI, or artificial insemination, is a means that beef and dairy producers can utilize proven and select bulls, proven bulls, to be able to utilize in their herd to either make changes, improvements, create a better product.
Describe the product you produce.
The broilers, they are raised out in a chicken tractor. They're out on the ground from about the time they come as small chicks to when they are butchered at about 7 to 8 weeks of age. Our chicken tractors are 8 feet wide, 12 feet long, about 2.5 feet tall, with wheels on each corner, so we can pick them up and roll them along every day. We move them to a fresh set of grass. Well, they're still confined for their protection, but they're raised on the grass and the dirt, so they can find some bugs, forage in the grass, moved out of their manure every day, and just fresh air. I believe it's a healthier product because they're setting out in the open, out in a kind of a natural thing, and they're not it's better for the chickens for that way, and we don't have to scoop any manure.
What are the ultimate growing conditions for lavender?
Lavender needs full sun and good drainage, and as you can see, most of our fields here are on a southern exposure hill, and so we have great drainage, and what doesn't run off soaks in very fast because this whole hillside is sandstone. It does not need good soil. In fact, it doesn't really like it. It kind of likes crappy soil. And so apparently this had never been farmed. It had only been pasture, mainly because of all the rock that was here. But it really likes sandy soil, doesn't need nutrients. We do not use any chemicals, any fertilizers, nothing. And there's no natural pests or enemies. I have deer that come through the field every night. We've got rabbits that live out here, and they don't bother. It's too bitter for them to chew on. And the interesting side benefit of that is because of the lavender here, the deer and the rabbits may go through my wife's garden, but they don't bother anything there. She has had no damage in 16 years of having the lavender out here.
The biggest challenges we have probably is the cold winter.
more than the hot summer. But you go up into Washington and Oregon, they don't have these extended heat spells like we have. So that's a challenge, especially when they're getting established. But the winters are the biggest thing, and the cold temperature isn't as much of an issue because everything we're growing is grown in Ontario. The difference is they get snow cover in the winter, and you know how much snow we had this last winter. We don't get enough coverage. So
snow makes a good blanket.
So when we get these sudden in the fall, these sudden cold snaps, that's what's a real killer to lavender or to other crops if they haven't gone dormant yet. Because lavender does not like too much water. It literally doesn't like too much water because that creates the conditions for stem and root rot. So they either put them in raised gardens or on hillsides so that the water, when we get these rains occasionally here in Kansas, that it doesn't set in water. So that's kind of a key thing in terms of propagation. But like up at Bennington, the soil is very rocky, and it's just perfect for lavender. It's absolutely perfect for lavender. And of course, our soil here is pretty sandy, being on the riverbed here at the Smoky Hill. Why, that's helpful because it drains quickly.
It's been really challenging the last 4 years. And so a lot of them have lost all their plants and had to start over. And Becky Ricard is down outside of Fort Scott. I don't know how many times she's replaced her plants because they just had so much rain. And lavender is a drought-tolerant plant. They like a drink, but then they need to dry out before they get any more moisture. Part of it is if the root system stays damp, it develops a fungus, and the fungus actually kills the plant. There's probably more lavender killed by overwatering than just totally ignoring it. Many people say, well, I can't keep lavender alive. And then when I start talking with them, I find out they're right in line with all the water-intensive plants they're watering every day. And I just tell them, stop when you get to the lavender, and you should be okay. They do need to be trimmed or cut back, but it's not a severe cutback, not anything like roses or anything like that. They are a long-living perennial. My oldest plants are going on 17 years old, and the bulk of the fields are probably between 12 and 14 years old right now. And we're putting in some replacement plants for those that were damaged from the winter kill this year. There's a disease called Phytophthora nicotiana, and Phytophthora in the state of Kansas is really, it's already prevalent in the soil, but it's this particular strain that seems to really be devastating to lavender. And we haven't had the issue here in Kansas, thank God. The Department of Ag really stepped in and helped us when we had some plants shipped in here that were infected. And nationwide, we're having everybody ship their plants to Clemson University in South Carolina to have them tested, just to make sure we've got identifying the same strain, because they're doing DNA sequencing. And that's through our United States Lavender Growers Association that we do that.
When you think of cotton, where is it grown in the United States?
Well, there's a cotton belt that pretty well covers the southern tier states. Kind of the Mason-Dixon line and below is where it really is, what's really the cotton belt. The only ones above the Missouri and Kansas and Virginia are the northernmost states it's grown.
Pratt County is probably one of the larger growing counties in Kansas. There's Kiowa County, Stevens County out in western Kansas, Barber County, and there's going to be some in Edwards County.
We're looking at acres this year to increase considerable over what they were last year. We're looking at increase probably threefold. So there's a lot of interest in cotton this year. Most of that's due to the fact of the low the commodity prices that are lower than what have been in the past. So that's what's driving it this year. It gives a good alternative crop to where it gives another choice. A lot of people are afraid of growing it just because they're not familiar with it. It takes a little bit different equipment. The planting equipment's the same, the harvesting equipment's different. But that's the reason most of them are a little skeptical, I guess, trying to get their feet wet just because they don't know about it. But we're trying to teach them, they're trying to learn, and hopefully we'll get a whole more activity going this year. We're very comparable to the panhandle of Texas, the high plains of Texas, they call it. Our weather here is very comparable to theirs. They're so much higher down there that they have cooler nights, but our nights stay warmer than that, so we still get about the same degree growing days as they do.
Cotton is very efficient on its water use. On the past, when we've compared it to water use of corn, we've used anywhere from about 2/3 less water than what the corn would take. If you're looking at 12 inches of water on corn, you can get by with 3 or 4 inches on the cotton.
We hope you've enjoyed this season of Real Ag and maybe learned a few things along the way. If you want to check out all the episodes of this series, go to SmokyHillsTV.org. For the Real Ag crew, I'm Kyle Bauer, and this has been Real Ag.
Production of Real Ag is made possible in part by an underwriting grant from the Kansas Soybean Commission, the Soybean Checkoff, progress powered by farmers.